Hello, and welcome to the Soul Shaking Love podcast, bringing you expert teachers to help you feel that mind, body, and spirit connection, both with yourself and your true love. I'm your host, Love Coach Valerie Green from CoachValerieGreen.com. And in this episode, I'm so excited to interview transformational coach Marni Battista. Hello, Marni.
Hi.
Hello. I have been following Marni because we actually shared a coaching training together. We both went to the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, and which is a very comprehensive program to help people heal their not just their conscious patterns, but limiting beliefs so we can really live our best life. And so I'll tell you a little bit about Marni because I've been following her since then, and I just love the work she does to empower women. She is the CEO and founder of the Institute for Living Courageously, which, as many of you know, I love talking about courage and how it comes from the root word cœur, which means heart, and really living from our heart, and that self-compassion and self-care, which I know Marni's going to talk about. And she's cultivated a research-based, personalized, and holistic system that inspires ambitious women to shed self-imposed limitations, nurture authenticity, and live life on their own terms. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today is big work, big life, how to optimize for success when you're successful. But many of us women, and I'll be the first to say this, don't know. Because when I was building my coaching practice, a lot of you don't know that I actually worked overtime because I'm so passionate about it. And I love what I do and I love serving all of you. And I got burned out too. And I really had to change the way that I lived my life in order to incorporate more self-care. And it really, really helps to have support with that. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is really how to live authentically with balance. And so for that, I just want to ask you, Marni, we'll dive in. What is the secret to beating overwhelm and burnout?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's funny. I just got off. This is so perfect timing. And thank you for having me. I just got off with a client who is amazing. And she used to be in the military. And then she was a Olympic athlete. And she's a large animal doctor. And she's been building her business. And so you could just tell I'm describing the qualities of a very highly successful, achieving person. And she came to the call and she's like, I am so happy that I'm successful. I have more clients than I can count that I need. And I hate my life. Right. Because there's no joy, right? There's no time for joy because she built what she thought she wanted and she didn't really handle a lot of the internal pieces. And so she feels everything but freedom, right? She feels like she has a big work and a big life, but there's no time for joy or no time for stillness or no time to create a loving relationship and so when we went through and this is like so typical. That's why I think it's a great case study. So we went through and we're like, okay, here's your goals and where are you stuck? And one thing that I said, which relates to overwhelm, and I'm going to start here, is that there is no such thing, in my opinion, as poor time management, right? Like people think that they're overwhelmed because they're not managing time.
Right.
And what I believe is that what you need to manage is your mindset.
Right.
And you need to plan.
Right.
So there's no such thing as bad time management. There's bad planning. I was listening to, I think it was Mel Robbins, possibly. I can't remember who said it, but she said something like or maybe it was Brooke Castillo. I can't remember where I heard it, but it was really great. And I want to give kudos to whoever said it first. But the idea is that when you're overwhelmed, everything is urgent. And the reason why everything is urgent is because you're not planning.
Right.
So having a structure and a plan to designing your life, so that everything that you do is moving you toward your ideal life vision of how you want to experience your life is the goal. And then you just simply reverse engineer it through planning.
Exactly. I love what you said. I'm reminded of that quote that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
The thing is, though, that a lot of women plan, from their masculine energy, and it's just about their career. So, or it's just about a specific goal, because that's what masculine energy is really drilling it down to, what do I want to accomplish? But if you notice, that narrows the focus, which is really good if you want to accomplish, being an athlete, for example. And what you're saying is, and this is what I hear, is the more feminine, holistic way to plan, which is to zoom out and look at your entire life. What's all the aspects of what in the coaching world we call the wheel of life?
Yes, the
You've
whole
heard of
wheel
that.
of life. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Your career, your relationships, your emotional health, your physical self-care, right? Your friendships, your family, what brings you joy, your creativity, all of it, right? And so that's brilliant that you help women that are just through no fault of their own, because this is what society teaches us, is to focus on one thing and just, get it done. Just do it.
Well, it is so appropriate that you're talking about having that masculine focus on everything. So this client that I was just talking about, like, she's a ballroom dancer and she does competition, which is like fun, right? And very feminine. And she's like, I wear the makeup and the dress, right? But when your eyebrows are furrowed and you're like, how the hell am I going to fit that in, right? Like, you're missing out. You're letting like that lack of freedom steal the joy, right? And here's what's really cool is that when we look at this person, for example, and we're like, what are your goals? They're not just like, have more work-life balance, because that's so generic. But I was like, what does that even look like? And she's like, well, I need to learn how to have self-acceptance. I need to work on boundaries, right? Like, I have this feeling like I have to take care of other people and that they're more important than my needs. Right. And so there's all these really beautiful internal pieces that are the linchpins to creating that success, right? That big work, that big life, like optimizing it. Yeah, planning is really, really important. But you can't execute on any of these strategies unless you do the inner work, right? And so it's mastering the inner piece is really the leverage so that you can release all that cortisol and adrenaline and all of those hormones and all those things that go in when we're like overly striving.
Exactly.
Right. And so then, and this is really, really important, like, all those things that you're doing in your life that are making you overwhelmed, you're like operating like while you're pushing the gas and the brake at the same time. Right. Because that. all that like, all that furrow brow stuff is like, you're not even showing up and doing those things like from your whole heart.
Totally. And I mean, I just made that face, right? I'm not making fun of it. I mean, it's really close to home. I was trained to be a human doing and not a human being myself. And, with burnout to boot. So I know exactly what that feels like. And I want to caveat, it's not like it's bad to come from masculine energy, right? It's like each energy has a purpose.
Yeah, right.
And it's just that when we're burnt out, then we need to zoom out and look at the entire picture and how it all fits together. And what does it actually mean to live a meaningful life on my own terms? So that's what I want to ask you, Marni. Like, what does that mean to live a life on your own terms?
Well, to me, that is that we have, and you said it so great, I was programmed to be a human doing, not a human being, right? So if we have ingrained in us through culture, through parenting, through our ancestors, right? All these things of what it means to be successful. Yep. And as women, especially, I feel like we were taught that when we do good, pat the head, little girl, right? Like, good job. You got an A. Good job. You won a trophy. Good job. You got into the right school. Good job. You got the job, we get rewarded. Our brain gets rewarded from winning, right? From achieving, right? And so we never really even take a moment to say, what actually would at the end of my life, I'd look back and I'd go like, wow, I like literally, sucked the marrow out of the bone of life,
Yes.
I really, really lived it. And so one of the frameworks that I've been teaching, and this is what my upcoming book is about, is how do you design this life on your terms? How do you create a meaningful life using two frameworks? One is a life design system, and the mindset around that is these 7 spiritual questions. And they're questions that come from the Old Testament. And I've been saying this a lot, like if these questions had a better publicist, we'd know about them as much as we know about the 10 Commandments.
I'm sure
right?
now I need to know what they are.
Right, exactly. And so the story goes in the Old Testament that when you hit the pearly gates, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, it says, so I got these 7 questions, and this is how we're going to like sort of define, did you live a meaningful life? And the first one is and this is really interesting because I universalized this, but I'm going to start it because I think it's really important. The first question is, were you honest in your business? Okay. So I did a lot of research for this, and the story goes, the reason why that was the first one, because they figured if their old rabbis figured that if you were actually honest in your business, which related to money, which is people, are obviously very, very focused on having, right? That if you were ethical and you were honest, then that meant that you were really living a life of integrity, right? Yeah. And so I was like, how do you universalize this and modernize it? And the way that I sort of did that is, the question is, were you radically honest with yourself?
Yes, I love that question.
And so if we're going to look at like, okay, so let's say a meaningful life is it's a successful life is about meaning. And one of these things is I radically honest with myself. And at the end, I go, you know what? I spoke up. I didn't hide. I didn't minimize myself. I didn't tolerate. I didn't settle for the backup life. I like showed up, and I was honest with myself, and I was honest with others, and I lived from that place, and I was in integrity with my soul.
Yes.
Right. And you're like, you know what? I did that.
Exactly.
I did that. I did that more often than not. And when I didn't, I was aware of it, and I got honest with myself. Right. And so these questions allow us to go through trying to be more of who we are.
Yes.
Which you can never fail then. Right. And you go, you know what? Like the outcome, did I make this money? Did I have this car? Did I have this kind of man in my life? Did I weigh this much? Whatever the hell you're measuring your worthiness around, right? They become kind of fun byproducts, right? Because it's the being, and it's the journey and how you lived your life and approached all those things that actually creates the meaning. That's where you feel like you're living your life rather than letting life live you.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm sure a lot of us are thinking, well, okay, that's a great question. Am I really living true to myself? Am I really being honest with myself? But what if the answer I get is a no? Then what?
Then that's great. So that goes to one of the other questions, and that is I always want to say they're all my favorite, but this is one that's really, really the most like bang for your buck, and that is did you seek wisdom? And most of us, as high achieving professional women, what we do is we seek knowledge. We're like, give me the information, right? Like if we could out hustle our results by better information, the hack, you're like in the coaching business, like the funnel, the
exactly.
Instagram hack,
what do I need to do?
Right. Like, how do you find allies in the corporate world? Like there's always like a information, and the old way is like, well, if I just got that one piece of information, then then all my problems would be solved. And so to go back to your original question is, what if I'm not being honest? A wisdom seeking question is a question where the answer comes from inside, and and the answer is based on the cumulative experiences that you've had in your life that have given you this knowing, this truth,
Yes.
right? And so and we call them WSK, wisdom seeking questions. So I might say, if someone's like, you know what, I haven't been honest with myself. And so the wisdom seeking question would not be what's wrong with me.
Right.
The wisdom seeking, or why does this keep happening to me? The wisdom seeking question might be, I wonder what this lack of honesty is here to teach me.
Exactly.
What is it that I need to release or come back to my whole self in a way so that I can have honesty? What do I need to give myself permission to be, think, do, have, to start having more self-honesty? All these questions,
Right.
they're great. You could answer them yourself. They don't rely on anyone else, and you can't Google it.
Yes, I completely agree. And so if people are asking themselves this question, how do they know if it's the right or the wrong thing to do?
I love that. So there's sort of two voices, and like at IPEC, we learned to the coaching school we went to, you and I, they call it like the gremlin. It's the inner,
Yes.
internalized negative critical voice.
Yep. Yep.
And that voice is usually saying what you can and can't have, and what you should and should not do. And it feels kind of gross.
Yep.
When the gremlin is driving, right? And so one of the things that I teach women how to do is to understand and know the difference between that voice and this one that is our intuition, our knowing, our love.
Yes.
And that comes from this place. It's like it pings. It's almost like undeniable. The way you can find it is if you tap into a memory or an experience of gratitude or love or appreciation. You're like, oh, I knew what that feels like. A moment where you were really seen, a moment where you felt really in flow, where you felt like your true self was really shining. That's resonance.
Right.
And so you're kind of like becoming a little like a seeker, like a heat, seeking the heat, like what's resonant and what's dissonant. And so the truth, the answer of those wisdom seeking questions is like, oh, that feels resonant. Yeah, that something there is like I'm having a felt sense around it. And so once you start to know resonance and dissonance, basically what we're trying to do in designing a life you love on your terms is like, how do I figure out what is resonant for me? What is an expression in my soul? And how do I create experiences in my life that are more often resonant? And then I handle the ones that are dissonant so that I find alignment.
I love what you just said. I want to unpack it because resonance and dissonance are auditory terms, but that's actually how I experience my intuition as well. Although I experience it physically, I like to say it's what feels right rather than what feels good. Because good feelings are kind of like that instant gratification, and it feels like that adrenaline rush that like I want to accomplish something. What do I need to do? Give me information.
I love that.
Versus like if I slow down and feel what feels peaceful inside. And I love what you're saying about resonance, peace and gratitude and joy and I want to say connection with others. Those are the things that feel fulfilling, not just happiness. Happiness is fleeting. But what you're saying is you want to learn how to feel what fulfillment feels like, which is deeper. And when you feel fulfilled, I mean, this is my way of putting it, is that it feels to me almost like on the inside, like I have this, I can feel the vertical channel because I'm clairsentient, which means I receive my higher guidance through body sensations. And for me, how I know that I'm receiving something that feels right is it almost feels like my vertical channel is like a guitar string.
Love that.
And I feel it like resonating, sort of like that resonance that you said, but it feels fulfilling. And when I've had experiences in my life where I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm so grateful. I'm so fulfilled. That's how it feels. And so what I'm hearing you say is it's just learning how to slow down and tap into the felt sense of it, because our mind can lie to us.
Yes.
As we're discovering, the body keeps the score, right?
Right. And that's one of the other 7 questions, right? Is did you create time for stillness, right? Because you have to listen.
Right. Yep.
Right. And so all of these that felt sense, that knowing. I love even that you're saying like, I feel it this way for me, right? We all feel it in a different way.
Exactly.
Right. And they all weave together. Right. So now then I'm like, oh, I'm being honest with myself. I'm like, oh, that's the adrenaline. I was teaching this to a co-ed group because I'm test driving like my worksheets and some of my things for my book. And so this guy was like saying he was understanding it as adrenaline, or like, yeah, like when I'm doing search and rescue missions or when I'm riding my motorcycle. And so I was like, that's fun.
Yes.
And that's like a dopamine hit, right?
Exactly.
But what we're trying to create is like that center, like of you that you said, of fulfillment, and how can we design our life so that we can slow down, that we can have that spaciousness, that we can create intentionally, so that we can plan.
Yes.
Right. So that we can be in the doing, because we do live in a world where doing is important.
Of
right.
course.
And there's that old saying, doing plus being equals having, right? Because doing and doing and doing plus doing and doing just equals burnout, exhaustion, overwhelm, and like never mind.
Right. Yep. It's a good way of putting it. And the being, as you're talking about, what you seem to be saying is that it's about more of the slowing down and tuning in to what feels fulfilling. And from that place, then taking time to plan a life that on the outside looks in a way that makes you feel fulfilled on the inside, not just instant gratification or, like thrilling, as you were just describing with the riding down, in a convertible with the wind blowing in our hair. And like, that's really fun. But that's not how we want to live our life every day.
Well, we can't, right? I mean, like, even if people have money and resources to do that, we all know the stories of how they don't feel fulfilled on the inside, right? And so
exactly,
it's about being able to design a life in which I say, like, if you're familiar with the Jackson Pollock art, where it's just like this expression of color and shape on a blank canvas, and so I think like designing a life you love on your terms is like a Jackson Pollock of your soul into your life. So like everything you're doing is like, this is me, right? Like you and I doing this right now, like this is so my soul and so your soul, with some microphones, what I mean? And some technology, right?
Exactly.
Yes, we all still have to like, organize our taxes and pay our bills and go to the market and all those things. But like, we can actually do those ways and do those things in a way that also feels like really resonant and dissonant. And
right. Yep.
As simple as, time blocking time to go to the store so that you can meal prep and eat healthfully all week sounds really boring. But when you take those things and you go like, how can I do these in a way that are expression of my soul? For me, it's like, I have spaciousness. I get to go find food that I really like, love, and am excited about. So sometimes I go to a market and sometimes I go to like the fish place, so I can like get some, I have for me, creativity and cooking, right? Feels really aligned. So going to that market and getting that fish feels like really expressed, right? For someone, it might be like, that is not my soul, right? For me, like, convenience is a huge expression of who I am. And Instacart is like my jam, like click, click, click. Like that is my soul on fire. Do you know what I mean? And so
just showing up and having it delivered.
Right? And so, or ordering meals, like in the pre-made meals, right? So all of these little mundane things have the opportunity to come from an expression of your soul when you sit down and you go, who am I? What lights me up? And then how do I start organizing and architecting from that place?
Yes, that is such a good example, because we all have to buy and cook and eat food. And there's so many different ways to do it, depending on what actually feels right and balanced. And if we're just in our head planning and shooting on ourselves, then we're not slowing down and tuning in and asking what feels most fulfilling. And so I love the way that you've described it. What I sense, though, is that a lot of women who are watching this or listening to this are kind of asking, well, it's really hard to do this on my own. If we're asking ourselves these questions on our own, I know for me, if I don't have at least a set of structure, like I'm journaling questions in the morning and in the evening, for example, that from a internal family systems perspective, my protectors take me over and cause me to do things that don't feel so fulfilling unless I really take the time to slow down and plan. And it's really easy to not be honest with ourselves, as you're saying. And so I know that you have a community that that you created. And so tell us about that and tell us about how that supports women in really getting honest with themselves in a way that's, not that we can't do it on our own, but it feels even more fulfilling to do it with others.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So here's the thing. I think most people don't even know from my research that you can intentionally design your life. Right? And that we all created the lives we have. Wherever you are, just take a stop, pause and go so 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I had a plan. I envisioned my identity and I had a timeline, and I thought this was the game plan of my life and it was going to look like this, because we all do that, right?
Hopefully.
We it's in our brain, right? Whether it's I'm going to grow up and be a this, or I'm going to go to this school and then I'm going to probably have this job and I'm going to get married, or I'm not, or I'm going to have kids, or I'm not, right? We just kind of have an identity and an imagined timeline.
Right.
But what happens for so many people is you wake up at whatever age and you're like, wait, is this even me anymore?
Right.
Right. Who am I? And so it's really talking about having a structure to get rid of all the shoulds and try and actually create a blank slate for your Jackson Pollock, right? To really create true consciousness, which is I'm going to actually choose and not have anything that's pre-installed, pre-planned, like all those old neural wirings. I'm going to actually be really curious and get to know who I am now and really find out when I am in flow, when I am in resonance, when I am in peace and joy and yes, fun, but fun, it's here, right? What am I doing? How do I best carry that out? What's the environment, one-on-one, group, connection? Literally you can design all the different parts of your life. And then what are the core values that really make me feel alive? And you start to really look at in a structured way, well then, how could I create my new identity and my new dream without having to blow up the life I have, by going through some very specific experimentation strategies so I start to enjoy the journey rather than waiting to live my life when I have a certain amount of money in my bank account,
right?
When my kids grow up, when my parents don't need me so much anymore, when I get skinnier, when I, right? No. So this is a structured way to start living a meaningful life now without blowing up the life you have. And there actually is a structure and a way. And what's really fascinating to me is, and I'll just share this last thing, is so when I started doing this 4 or 5 years ago, I had an idea. And I actually designed it and implemented it and ended up selling my house, living in an RV for a year. And now I'm living in Colorado and I totally changed my business and all these things.
Cool.
And so in preparation for, and as part of writing my book, I was like, I think I need to go through this process again, now. And so I sat down and I was like, okay, so who is Marni now? What's my what? My how and my why. And here's the gift that I want to share with you, because I didn't even know this until literally this past weekend.
Ooh.
Who I am has expanded. I am more of who I am, and I know more of who I am than I ever could have imagined 4 years ago when I did this, because of all the experimenting and experiences and exploration that I've done. Right. So when I first did this list 5 years ago, my what, how, and why, it was very small because I only knew it in the reality that I had built. And when I looked at it 4 or 5 years later, I'm like, whoa, I didn't even know this about me.
Isn't that amazing?
Nice to meet me. You know what I mean? At this part of my life. And so I'm just giving you that little tidbit, because there is so much more of you who are listening than you even know that is untapped and unexpanded and unresourced. So if you want to live a fulfilling, meaningful life, then it's time to find out what's on your soul and expand and live into that so that you can be like the Jackson Pollock that is like the whole, like, floor at the Met, right? Like
That's
it is
right.
like big, right? It is like, wow, it's just color and shape. And that feels like we've lived like a full life at any stage.
Exactly. Yeah. The image I'm getting is just like this huge room with all these doors to open with things you've never discovered and learning new parts of yourself. And that is what it can be like if we slow down and ask ourselves these questions. And I know that most of us really, if we're honest with ourselves, we fear the unknown. And
yes,
it's like we might discover something wonderful about ourselves, or we might just discover something that we're scared to see in ourselves. And so, I just want to acknowledge that. And how do you help women address that?
Well, that's like the biggest thing, right? Is like, there's this time where we are in what I call the newfound gap. And the reason I call it that is because my own adventure, and I talk about this in my book, I was living in this RV, I sold the house, I was like signing up for this big adventure. And I kept comparing my life to my old life. And I was like full of like fear and regret and doubt. Like, what have I done? What have I done? I thought it would be a challenge, but I didn't really think it'd be challenging. Like, it sounds cool, right?
Right.
Like, I'm going to go on a challenge. And I was on this hike on this little teeny part of the Appalachian Trail. And I climbed up, it was raining, and I was like doing this hike, and I got to this one point, and it's on one side is, I believe, North Carolina, and the other side is Tennessee. And you're literally smack dab in the middle of these two states. And it clicked, it just hit, like universe aligned, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, like I've been trying to be in a new life and comparing it to my old life. And I'm in the gap of a transition. And it's messy, and that's okay. Like, we have to be with ourselves in our courage and our transition, and not shame ourselves for like not being happy, right? Or feeling like we got it, because change is big and it's messy. And that part was my soul preparing for transformation, and was the transformation itself.
Yeah.
And so if you leap and you start doing these experiments, and you take these redirections and pivot in writing your next chapter, having those spiritual 7 questions is the way to find joy in the change, in the bravery and the courage, and then doing it in a community in which I've created for this 6-month process makes it even actually more fun, right? Because you know that you have sojourners that are with you on this journey while you stand in that newfound gap, and you're like, Tennessee, Carolina. You know what? I have to commit. I can't keep comparing my old self to this self, because this is where I am now. And so it's a process. And so having support during that process and learning these 7 questions is like a game changer if we want to evolve consciously in the changes of our life. Because the last thing I'll say is this: life is going to throw you change, whether you want it or not. Yep. So it's kind of cool to be ahead of it.
I completely agree. And so tell us more about how you support women and really making the changes that come from within on a fulfilling level, because it is much harder to do that on our own. Obviously we can, but it helps to have support.
Yeah. So what I'm doing in this particular community is walking through this structured process called Live Life on Your Terms, which is a life design process, whereby you go through the steps that we talked about. You create these experiments, you start implementing, and you learn how to assess and adjust and plan, all the while you're doing the deep internal work so that you evolve as your dream evolves. And having weekly coaching and support, going through these process, learning these 7 questions, doing the internal work, being really led on the journey so that you feel like your journey of writing your next chapter is fulfilling as whatever destination you end up.
Yes, it's a wonderful way of saying it. And so is your community only from a certain date to a certain date, or is it more women can join anytime?
Well, so here's the thing. I'm living life on my terms, Valerie. So what I decided to do is to do a 6-month experiment of this journey in a group. And I'm enrolling a lot of ladies right now. And I will be closing this cohort in the middle of October. And so if you're listening to this and it's not October 2023, you can always get on the waiting list for either this or whatever iteration of this that I do as I evolve. One of my core values is new and novel. So
Yes.
my clients who've been with me for like 10 or 14 years, they're like, here she goes again.
Exactly. I know, it's
Right?
awesome.
I'm like reinventing. So to find out more, you can email me at VIP at datingwithdignity.com, which is my original email. As I've evolved, I just kept that old email. So it's VIP at datingwithdignity.com.
Great. Yes. And I'll spell that out, VIP at datingwithdignity.com. I'll put that in the show notes if you're listening, and then in the YouTube video underneath. And this episode will be around forever. So it is October, and I mean, it's the end of September now in 2023. We will probably release this at the end of September in 2023. So if you're listening to this now, then you have a couple weeks to get in Marni's community to email her and ask her questions, so that you can really design a life that you feel fulfilled in. And then if you're listening or watching this later, she'll probably be doing the second, third, fourth iteration, whatever is her fulfillment, supporting women in living a fulfilled life, because this is her purpose and, or her current iteration of it. And that's what we're here as coaches who have designed lives that make us feel fulfilled. Obviously, we teach what we need to learn, and it's layers of an onion.
Exactly. And that's what's so fun. Like I said, I just did this whole process, and I really realized that what really lights me up is learning something, doing something, transforming or changing and sharing it with others. That just really lights me up. And so I'm super excited. Exactly. I'm super excited to share this life design journey that I've been on really for the last eight years, and in the last few years of implementing after lots of experimenting. So super fun.
Amazing. Yeah. And likewise, I mean, it took a really long time for me to design my life to the point where it felt fulfilling to me. And I've had a lot of support on the way, and I don't think I could have done it without the support. So that's why I help others. And that's why Marni helps others to shorten the learning curve for all of you. So if you feel resonance with what Marni has shared, I encourage you to email her. I will put the email in the show notes. And if you like this episode, please share it with other women so that they can access this wisdom too, so that we can all live life on our own terms, which is better for us, better for those around us, better for the planet, just because we're in harmony. And, so it is, and so it shall be, as they say.
I love that. Thank you, Valerie.
Yes. And till next time.